The text came through at 6:47 p.m., right as I was heating up leftover Chinese takeout in our pristine kitchen. The same kitchen where Elise had kissed me goodbye that morning, promising we'd finally have that talk about our future tonight. Staying late at work, don't wait for me. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I stared at the message, my fork suspended halfway to my mouth. Mason Drake, 38 years old, ex-military turned IT security consultant, and apparently the world's biggest fool. The lo mein suddenly tasted like cardboard. See, here's the thing about being in IT security. You develop a certain paranoia about everything. It's an occupational hazard. When your job is to catch people lying, cheating, and stealing in the digital world, you start noticing patterns everywhere. And Elise's patterns had been interesting lately. Late nights at the office. New clothes she claimed were hand-me-downs from her friend Sophia. A sudden interest in going to the gym at 5 a.m. And my personal favorite, the way she'd started putting her phone face down during dinner, like it might spontaneously combust if I glimpsed the screen. I dumped the takeout in the trash and grabbed my keys. The drive to Elise's office building took exactly 12 minutes. I know because I'd timed it 3 weeks ago when this whole charade started. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars belonging to the cleaning crew, and one lonely sedan that definitely wasn't my wife's silver BMW. I parked across the street at a Dunkin' Donuts and waited. And waited. At 7:23 p.m., I drove home, made myself a sandwich, and settled into my basement man cave with a beer and my laptop. Time for some reconnaissance. Credit card statements don't lie. Neither do expense reports, GPS data, or the digital breadcrumbs people leave everywhere they go. By 9 p.m., I had a fascinating picture of my wife's recent activities. Hotel charges on days she claimed to be at corporate training sessions, restaurants she'd never mentioned visiting, and my personal favorite, a charge for 2 dinners at Romano's, the fancy Italian place downtown. On the same night, she'd texted me she was too tired to eat. At 9:47 p.m., another text. Just leaving now, exhausted, going straight to bed when I get home. I closed the laptop and headed upstairs to wait. Elise walked through the front door at 10:15 p.m., looking anything but exhausted. Her makeup was fresh, her hair perfectly styled, and she was practically glowing. She jumped when she saw me sitting in the living room. "Mason, you scared me. I thought you'd be asleep by now." "Couldn't sleep. How was work?" She kicked off her heels and avoided eye contact. Brutal. We're implementing a new HR system, and Grant, my boss, wanted to go over everything before the board meeting tomorrow. Grant Soloway, Vice President of Operations, 42 years old, divorced, drives a red Porsche, and according to his LinkedIn profile, enjoys fine dining and weekend getaways. I'd done my homework. Sounds intense. You must be starving. Oh, we ordered pizza to the office. I'm actually pretty full. She headed toward the stairs. I'm going to shower and crash. Big day tomorrow. I nodded and smiled. Sweet dreams, honey. She paused at the bottom of the stairs, studying my face. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth. Instead, she forced a smile and disappeared upstairs. I waited until I heard the shower running, then pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos I'd taken earlier that evening. Photos of Elise walking into the Riverside Inn, a seedy motel on the outskirts of town. Photos of her laughing as she climbed into a red Porsche. Photos of Grant Soloway's hand on the small of my wife's back as they entered room 12. My phone buzzed with a text from Will, my old army buddy who'd gone into private investigation after his discharge. Got those background checks you wanted. Call me tomorrow. This guy's got more baggage than Logan Airport. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in the dark, listening to my wife humming in the shower upstairs. She was humming Can't Help Myself by the Four Tops. She used to hum that song when we were dating, back when she was happy to see me come home. Now she was humming it after spending the evening with another man. The next morning, Elise was already gone when I woke up. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Early meeting. Love you. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash, then made coffee and called Will. Jesus, Mason, where do I start? Will's gravelly voice came through the speaker as I settled into my home office. Your boy Grant is a real piece of work. 3 affairs in his last marriage, 2 sexual harassment complaints that got quietly settled, and a gambling problem that nearly cost him his house in 2019. Anything recent? Oh, this is where it gets interesting. He's been skimming from the company expense account. Nothing major, a few thousand here and there, but enough to get him fired if anyone bothered to look. And get this, he's been using corporate credit cards for personal stuff, hotels, restaurants, jewelry purchases. I leaned back in my chair, a plan already forming. Will, I need you to do something for me. Name it. I need you to find out everything you can about Grant's current financial situation, bank accounts, credit cards, mortgage payments, everything, and I need it by tonight. Mason, what are you planning? I stared out the window at Mrs. Halpern, my elderly neighbor, tending to her garden. She looked up and waved. I waved back, maintaining the facade of suburban normalcy. I'm planning to have dinner with HR. That afternoon, I drove to Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar on the wrong side of town, where the beer was cheap and the gossip flowed freely. The owner, a sharp-tongued woman everyone called Red, had been serving drinks and collecting secrets for 30 years. If you wanted to know something about someone in this town, Red was your best bet. She looked up from wiping glasses as I walked in. Well, Mason Drake. Haven't seen you in here since your bachelor party. What brings you to my humble establishment? I slid onto a bar stool and ordered a beer. Just needed a change of scenery. Red studied me with knowing eyes. This wouldn't have anything to do with your missus and her new hobby, would it? My hand froze halfway to my beer. Excuse me? Honey, I've been in this business long enough to recognize a man whose world just got turned upside down. Plus, your wife's been the talk of the town for weeks now. What do you mean? Red leaned across the bar, lowering her voice. That fancy BMW of hers has been spotted at the Riverside Inn more times than a health inspector, and she ain't exactly been alone. I took a long pull of my beer. How long? About 2 months, give or take. Started right around the time that new VP got hired at her company. Flashy red sports car, thinks he's God's gift to womankind. Real charmer, that one. You know him? Grant Soloway. Comes in here sometimes, usually with whatever young thing he's trying to impress. Always pays in cash, always tips big, and always acts like he's slumming it with the common folk. Red's expression darkened. The kind of man who thinks money makes him untouchable. I finished my beer and left a 20 on the bar. Thanks, Red. Mason? I turned back. Whatever you're planning, make it count. Men like that, they don't learn unless the lesson hurts. I spent the rest of the afternoon in my basement, surrounded by printouts, bank statements, and corporate documents I'd accessed through methods that weren't entirely legal, but were completely undetectable. The picture that emerged was even worse than I'd imagined. Grant wasn't just having an affair with my wife, he was using her. Elise's HR access had been invaluable in covering up his financial indiscretions. Expense reports that should have been flagged were mysteriously approved. Harassment complaints that should have reached the board were quietly buried. My wife wasn't just cheating on me, she was helping him cheat the company. At 6 p.m., my phone rang. Will. I've got good news and bad news, he said without preamble. Bad news first. Grant's broke. The gambling problem never went away. He just got better at hiding it. He's leveraged to the eyeballs, behind on his mortgage, and maxed out on credit cards. The fancy car? Leased. The expensive suits? Credit. The man's living on borrowed time and borrowed money. And the good news? He's desperate enough to do something stupid. And desperate men make mistakes. I smiled for the first time in days. Will, I need you to do me another favor. I'm listening. Tomorrow night, Grant's going to receive an anonymous tip about a lucrative side business opportunity. Something that requires a cash investment but promises huge returns. Think you can make that happen? Mason, what are you? Just trust me. Can you do it? There was a pause. Yeah, I can do it. But Mason, be careful. Desperate men are dangerous. After I hung up, I opened a new browser window and began crafting the first phase of my revenge. If Grant wanted to play games with other people's lives, it was time he learned the rules had changed. I started with the corporate expense account, a few carefully placed anonymous emails to the company's financial auditing department, complete with detailed expense reports and credit card statements. Nothing illegal, just publicly available information presented in a way that raised uncomfortable questions. Next, I turned my attention to Elise's social media presence. My wife was addicted to Instagram, constantly posting carefully curated glimpses of our perfect life. But social media was a double-edged sword, especially when you were living a double life. I spent 2 hours going through her posts from the past 3 months, cross-referencing them with the credit card statements and hotel receipts I'd collected. The inconsistencies were glaring once you knew what to look for. Photos of her girls' night out posted from locations where she'd actually been with Grant. Check-ins at restaurants on nights she'd claimed to be working late. Even a selfie taken at the Riverside Inn that she'd apparently posted by accident and quickly deleted. But not before I'd screenshotted it. I compiled everything into a neat digital package and saved it for later. Then I made myself dinner and waited for my wife to come home. She walked through the door at 10:30 p.m., later than usual and looking flustered. Sorry, honey. Grant needed me to stay late and help with some HR issues. You know how it is. I looked up from my book. Actually, I don't. What kind of HR issues require you to work until 10:30 at night? She hesitated for just a moment, long enough for me to know she was scrambling for a plausible lie. Employee complaints, very sensitive stuff. I can't really talk about it. Of course. Well, I'm sure Grant appreciates your dedication. Something in my tone made her look at me more carefully. Mason, is everything okay? You seem different lately. I smiled and went back to my book. Just tired, I guess. Work's been stressful. She stood there for another moment, then headed upstairs. I'm going to take a bath and go to bed. Don't wait up. After she was safely in the bathroom, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to an anonymous number. Package delivered, Phase 2 begins tomorrow. The next morning, I woke up early and drove to Grant's office building. I wanted to see his reaction when the anonymous financial audit request hit his desk. I didn't have to wait long. At 9:15 a.m., Grant burst out of the building's main entrance, phone pressed to his ear, face red with anger. He was gesticulating wildly as he paced the parking lot, clearly in the middle of a heated conversation. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language told the whole story. Someone had just ruined his day, and it was only getting started. I drove home with a smile on my face and spent the morning preparing Phase 2 of my plan. If Grant thought a financial audit was stressful, wait until he found out what I had planned for tonight. The Riverside Country Club's annual charity gala was the social event of the season, the kind of stuffy, pretentious affair where the town's elite gathered to pat themselves on the back for their generosity while gossiping about their neighbors. Elise had been looking forward to it for months, mainly because it was a chance to show off the new designer dress she'd bought with money from our joint account. What she didn't know was that I'd been planning to attend as well. I'd called in a favor from my old college roommate, who now served on the charity's board of directors. A last-minute ticket became available, and suddenly Mason Drake was on the guest list. I even bought a new tuxedo for the occasion. If I was going to crash my wife's party, I was going to look good doing it. The gala was held in the country club's main ballroom, a cavernous space filled with round tables, crystal chandeliers, and enough flowers to stock a funeral home. I arrived fashionably late and positioned myself at the bar where I had a perfect view of the entire room. Elise was easy to spot. She was holding court at a table near the front, surrounded by her usual crowd of corporate wives and social climbers. She looked stunning in her new dress, laughing and gesturing animatedly as she told some story that had her audience hanging on every word. Grant was at the same table, of course, playing the role of the charming executive. He was leaning back in his chair with the confidence of a man who thought he owned the world. Every few minutes, he and Elise would exchange meaningful glances across the table, the kind of looks that said they had secrets worth keeping. I ordered a scotch and settled in to watch the show. At 8:30 p.m., the evening's entertainment began with a silent auction, followed by speeches from various board members about the importance of giving back to the community. I used the distraction to move closer to Elise's table, positioning myself behind a pillar where I could hear their conversation. "Can't believe the auditing department is making such a big deal about a few expense reports," Grant was saying, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "It's like they have nothing better to do." "I'm sure it's just routine," Elise replied, but I could hear the worry in her voice. "These things usually blow over in a few days." "Not when someone's feeding them information," Grant muttered. "This feels personal." Sophia, Elise's best friend and the biggest gossip in 3 counties, leaned forward conspiratorially. "Do you think someone's trying to cause trouble for you at work?" "I know someone is. The question is who." I smiled and took another sip of my scotch. If only they knew how close their tormentor was. The speeches ended, and the dancing began. I watched as Grant asked Elise to dance, then led her onto the floor with the practiced moves of a man who'd seduced plenty of married women. They moved together with an intimacy that made my stomach turn, whispering and laughing like they were the only 2 people in the room. That's when I decided it was time to make my presence known. I walked onto the dance floor and tapped Grant on the shoulder. "Mind if I cut in?" Both Elise and Grant froze. My wife's face went white, while Grant looked like he'd just swallowed a live snake. "Mason!" Elise's voice was an octave higher than usual. "What are you doing here?" "Supporting a good cause," I replied smoothly, taking her hand and spinning her away from Grant. "You look beautiful tonight, honey. That dress really suits you." As we danced, I could feel the eyes of the entire room on us. Word was already spreading through the crowd, whispered conversations and pointed looks as people realized the drama unfolding on the dance floor. "How did you get tickets?" Elise asked, trying to maintain her composure. "I have my ways. Aren't you happy to see me?" "Of course I am. It's just unexpected. I thought it might be nice to spend an evening together. We've both been so busy with work lately." I spun her again, this time positioning us directly in front of Grant, who was standing at the edge of the dance floor looking murderous. "Speaking of work, how are things going with that HR project you've been spending so much time on?" Elise's grip on my hand tightened. "Fine. Everything's fine." "That's good to hear. I'd hate to think you were working late for nothing." The song ended, and I escorted Elise back to her table. Grant had disappeared, probably to the men's room to compose himself. I pulled out the chair next to Sophia and sat down. "Mason, what a surprise!" Sophia's smile was so fake it could have been made of plastic. "We weren't expecting to see you tonight. Last-minute decision. I thought it would be fun to surprise Elise." The conversation around the table died as everyone tried to process this unexpected development. Lauren, one of Elise's co-workers, cleared her throat awkwardly. "Well, it's nice that you could make it. Elise was just telling us about the new project she's working on at the office." "Oh, really? She's been so secretive about it at home. What kind of project is it?" Lauren glanced at Elise, who looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. It's an HR thing. Very technical." "I see. And Grant's been helping with this project?" The temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sophia busied herself with her wine glass, while Lauren suddenly became fascinated with the centerpiece. Grant's the VP, Elise said carefully. He oversees all the major projects. Of course he does. Where is Grant anyway? I was hoping to meet him. Before anyone could answer, Grant reappeared, looking like he'd splashed cold water on his face. He approached the table with the forced confidence of a man walking to his own execution. You must be Mason, he said, extending his hand. I've heard so much about you. I stood and shook his hand, gripping it just a little too firmly. All good things, I hope. Elise talks about you constantly. Grant's smile faltered. She's a valuable member of our team. I'm sure she is. In fact, I was just thinking we should have you over for dinner sometime. Elise works so many late nights. It would be nice to finally put a face to the name. That's very kind of you. Not at all. What do you say, honey? I turned to Elise, who looked like she was about to be sick. Should we invite Grant and his wife over for dinner next weekend? Grant's divorced, Sophia said helpfully, then immediately looked like she regretted opening her mouth. Oh, that's right, Elise mentioned that. Well, just Grant then. I'm sure you could use a home-cooked meal after all those late nights at the office. Grant was starting to sweat despite the air conditioning. I wouldn't want to impose. No imposition at all, I insist. The auction results were announced, providing a welcome distraction from the increasingly awkward conversation. I excused myself to get another drink, leaving Grant and Elise to stew in their own anxiety. At the bar, I ran into Red, who was working the event as part of the catering staff. Well, she said, mixing drinks with practiced efficiency. Fancy seeing you here. I thought I'd support a good cause. Uh-huh. And it has nothing to do with the fact that your wife and her boyfriend are at table 12? I smiled. I have no idea what you're talking about. Red laughed. Honey, I've been watching this soap opera all night. Half the room knows what's going on, and the other half is about to figure it out. You're playing with fire. Sometimes fire is exactly what you need. I returned to the table just as the evening's final speech was beginning. The charity's president was thanking everyone for their generous donations when my phone buzzed with a text from Will. Package delivered. Check your email. I opened my email and smiled. Will had done exactly what I'd asked. He'd sent an anonymous tip to the local newspaper's society reporter about Grant's financial troubles and questionable expense account practices. By tomorrow morning, everyone in town would know that the charming VP was living on borrowed money and company credit cards. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was about to be served. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, I stood up and raised my wine glass. I'd like to propose a toast, I announced, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, to my beautiful wife Elise, and to all the hard work she's been putting in lately. Her dedication to her job is truly inspiring. Elise's face was frozen in a rictus of panic, while Grant looked like he wanted to bolt for the exit. And to Grant, I continued, turning to face him directly. Thank you for keeping my wife so busy. I know how much she enjoys working under you. The double entendre hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Conversations at nearby tables stopped as people turned to stare. Sophia's mouth fell open, while Lauren suddenly became very interested in her purse. Grant stood abruptly. I should be going. Early day tomorrow. Of course. Don't let us keep you from your responsibilities. He practically ran from the ballroom, leaving Elise to face the music alone. She sat in stunned silence as whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Within minutes, everyone at the gala would know that something scandalous had just happened at table 12. I finished my wine and offered Elise my arm. Shall we head home, darling? I think we have a lot to talk about. The ride home was silent except for the hum of the engine and Elise's barely audible breathing. She sat pressed against the passenger door as far from me as possible, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. Her hands were shaking. I pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. Neither of us moved. How long have you known? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Does it matter? She turned to look at me, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Mason, I can explain. Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you explain the hotel receipts, the restaurant charges, the lies, the late-night meetings that somehow require you to change into lingerie. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. Or maybe you'd like to explain these. I handed her the envelope. With trembling fingers, she opened it and pulled out the photographs I'd taken at the Riverside Inn. Her face crumpled as she saw herself laughing in Grant's arms, kissing him in the parking lot, disappearing into room 12. Oh, God, she whispered. Quite a performance. You should have seen yourself tonight, pretending to be surprised when I showed up. Acting like the devoted wife while your boyfriend sat 3 feet away. You're better at this than I gave you credit for. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You've been screwing your boss for 2 months, using our joint account to pay for hotels and dinners, and lying to my face every single night. Did I miss anything? She was crying openly now, ugly sobs that shook her entire body. I never meant for this to happen. But it did happen, and now we have to deal with the consequences. What are you going to do? I got out of the car without answering and walked to the front door. She followed me inside, still clutching the photographs. Mason, please. We can work this out. It was a mistake. A stupid mistake. I'll end it. I'll quit my job if I have to. I poured myself a bourbon and sat down in my favorite chair. It's too late for that. What do you mean? I mean the wheels are already in motion. By tomorrow morning, Grant's financial problems will be front-page news in the society section. The company's board of directors will have some very interesting questions about expense account irregularities, and your friend Sophia will have some fascinating gossip to share with her social media followers. Elise's face went white. You wouldn't. I already have. She collapsed onto the couch, the fight going out of her like air from a punctured balloon. You're going to destroy us both. No, Elise, you already did that. I'm just making sure everyone else knows about it. The next morning, I woke up alone. Elise had spent the night in the guest room, and judging by the sounds I'd heard through the walls, she hadn't gotten much sleep. I made coffee and read the morning paper, which featured a small but prominent item about financial irregularities at a local corporation, and questions about executive expense accounts. Grant's name wasn't mentioned, but anyone who knew him would connect the dots. My phone rang as I was finishing my second cup of coffee. Will. Jesus Christ, Mason. What did you do last night? I went to a charity gala. Very nice event. You should have been there. I'm getting calls from 3 different reporters asking about Grant Soloway. Someone leaked his entire financial history to the press. Imagine that. Mason, this is serious. The man's career is over. His reputation is destroyed. When this gets out, he'll never work in corporate America again. Good. There was a long pause. What's the end game here? How far are you planning to take this? As far as it needs to go. After I hung up, I spent the morning implementing Phase 3 of my plan. I'd been monitoring Grant's email and text messages for weeks, a skill I'd learned in the military and perfected in my IT career. What I'd discovered was even more damaging than the financial irregularities. Grant wasn't just embezzling from the company, he was also selling confidential information to competitors, client lists, strategic plans, merger discussions. He'd been auctioning off corporate secrets to the highest bidder for months, and he'd been using Elise's HR access to cover his tracks. I compiled all the evidence into a comprehensive report and sent it anonymously to the FBI's white-collar crime division, the SEC, and the company's board of directors. Then I sat back and waited for the fireworks to begin. They didn't take long. At 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Murphy's in an hour. Come alone. I knew it was Grant before I even confirmed the number. The man was predictable in his desperation. Murphy's Tavern was nearly empty when I arrived. Grant was sitting in a corner booth, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his hands were shaking as he nursed a whiskey. I slid into the booth across from him. "You look terrible." "Cut the shit, Mason. I know it was you." "I'm sorry, what was you?" "The newspaper story, the financial audit, the FBI investigation that just shut down our entire corporate office. You've been systematically destroying my life, and I want to know why." I signaled red for a beer. "I think you know why." "Because of Elise? Look, I know you're upset, but—" "Upset?" I laughed. "Grant, I'm not upset. Upset is what you feel when your team loses the Super Bowl. This is something else entirely." "What do you want? Money? I can pay you. Not much, but—" "I don't want your money. I want you to understand something very important." I leaned forward, lowering my voice to barely above a whisper. "You thought you could take my wife, destroy my marriage, and steal from your company without consequences. You thought you were untouchable because you had money and power and charm. But here's the thing about consequences, Grant. They don't care how charming you are." His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "The FBI thing, that wasn't about Elise. That was about justice. You've been selling company secrets for months, using my wife's access to cover your tracks. Did you really think no one would notice?" "You can't prove that." I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot of one of his encrypted emails. His face went ashen as he read his own words, offering to sell client information to a competitor. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter? The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Grant drained his whiskey and stood up abruptly. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet." He stormed out of the bar, leaving me alone with Red, who'd been pretending not to listen from behind the bar. "That man's going to do something stupid," she said, refilling my beer. "I'm counting on it." That evening, Elise came home early for the first time in months. She looked exhausted, her usual polish replaced by the haggard appearance of someone whose world was falling apart. "They fired me," she said without preamble. I looked up from my laptop. "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not. This is exactly what you wanted." "What I wanted was a faithful wife. What I got was a corporate accomplice to embezzlement and espionage. There's a difference." She sat down heavily on the couch. "The FBI questioned me for 3 hours today. They think I helped Grant steal company secrets." "Did you?" "Not intentionally, but my access codes were used to download files I never touched. Someone was using my credentials to cover their tracks." "Imagine that." "They're talking about pressing charges against both of us." I closed the laptop and gave her my full attention. "Then you'd better get a good lawyer." "Mason, please. I know I hurt you, but I never meant for any of this to happen. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I don't deserve to go to prison for it." "You're right. You don't deserve prison. You deserve exactly what you're getting, the natural consequences of your choices." She stared at me with something approaching hatred. "You've destroyed everything. My job, my reputation, my future. Was it worth it?" I considered the question seriously. "Ask me tomorrow." The call came at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Grant's voice was slurred with alcohol and desperation. "I know you're listening, you bastard. I know you can hear every word I say. Meet me at your house in 1 hour, or I'm going to the police with everything I know about your illegal surveillance." I smiled as I hung up the phone. The man was finally ready to do something spectacularly stupid. I called Will. "It's happening today. Are you ready?" "Recording equipment is already in place. I'll be in position in 30 minutes. "And the backup plan?" "Red's got half the neighborhood on standby. One phone call, and you'll have more witnesses than a mob trial." I showered, dressed, and made coffee with the calm precision of a man preparing for battle. Elise was still asleep in the guest room. She'd been drinking wine until well past midnight, probably trying to numb the reality of her situation. At exactly 7 a.m., Grant's red Porsche screeched into my driveway. He stumbled out of the car, clearly drunk, and pounded on my front door hard enough to wake the entire neighborhood. I opened the door and stepped aside. "Come in. You're making a scene." He pushed past me into the living room, spinning around to face me with wild eyes. "You think you're so goddamn smart, don't you?" "I think I'm smart enough not to show up at someone's house drunk at 7 in the morning." "Shut up." He pulled out his phone and held it up. "I'm recording this. I want you to admit what you've done." "What exactly do you think I've done?" "Hacking into my email, stealing my financial records, destroying my career. I know it was you." I sat down in my favorite chair and gestured for him to do the same. He remained standing, swaying slightly. "Grant, you destroyed your own career when you started embezzling from the company. I just made sure people found out about it." "You have no proof of that." "I have emails, bank records, and encrypted communications with your buyers. I have hotel receipts showing you meeting with competitors. I have digital forensics that would make the FBI weep with joy. The question isn't whether I have proof. It's whether you're going to keep digging yourself deeper." Footsteps on the stairs announced Elise's arrival. She appeared in the living room wearing a bathrobe, her hair disheveled, looking like she'd been hit by a truck. "Grant, what are you doing here?" "Trying to fix the mess your husband created." She looked between us, confusion and fear warring on her face. "What's going on?" "Your boyfriend here thinks he can threaten me into silence. He seems to believe I'm responsible for his legal troubles." "You are responsible!" Grant's voice rose to a near shout. "You've been stalking me, hacking my accounts, feeding information to the FBI. It's harassment." "It's justice." That's when Grant snapped. He lunged forward, grabbing me by the shirt and pulling me to my feet. "I'm going to destroy you the same way you destroyed me." I let him hold me for exactly 3 seconds, long enough for the hidden cameras to capture his assault, then broke his grip with a move I'd learned in basic training. He stumbled backward, tripped over the coffee table, and crashed to the floor. "Grant!" Elise rushed to help him up. "Don't touch me!" He pushed her away and struggled to his feet. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't given me your access codes, none of this would have happened." "I never gave you my access codes. You left your laptop open. Your passwords saved. It was like you wanted me to use them." The room went silent as the implications sank in. Elise stared at Grant with growing horror. "You used my credentials to steal company files?" "I needed the money, the gambling debts, the mortgage, the credit cards. I was drowning, and the information was just sitting there, worth millions to the right buyers." "Oh my God." Elise sank onto the couch. "You let them think I was involved. You let them fire me for something you did. It wasn't supposed to go this far. If your husband hadn't interfered, my husband didn't make you steal from the company. My husband didn't make you use my access to commit corporate espionage. You did that all by yourself." Grant's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and went pale. "What is it?" I asked. "The FBI. They want me to come in for questioning." "I'd suggest you get a lawyer." He looked around the room like a trapped animal, his gaze settling on Elise. "You have to help me. Tell them you gave me permission to use your codes. Say it was a misunderstanding." "Are you insane? Please, Elise, I love you. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can start over somewhere else." She laughed, a bitter sound devoid of humor. "Start over? Grant, you destroyed my life. You used me, let me take the blame for your crimes, and now you want me to lie to federal investigators to save your skin? It's not like that. Get out. Elise, get out." Grant looked at me one last time, his face a mixture of rage and defeat. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." He stumbled toward the door, then turned back. "You know what the funny thing is? She came to me. Your precious wife threw herself at me the first day I started work. Told me how unhappy she was, how neglected she felt. I didn't seduce her. She seduced me." Elise's face crumpled, but I felt nothing except a cold satisfaction. Thanks for clearing that up. After Grant left, Elise and I sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she spoke. He's right, you know. I did throw myself at him. I was angry at you for working so much, for taking me for granted. I wanted to hurt you. Mission accomplished. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought it would just be a fling, something to make me feel wanted again. I didn't know about the embezzlement, the corporate espionage. I swear I didn't know. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. For the first time in months, I believed she was telling the truth. It doesn't matter now. Doesn't it? Mason, I know I can't undo what I've done, but maybe we can… No. The finality in my voice stopped her cold. There's no going back, Elise. You made your choice when you decided to betray our marriage. You made it again every time you lied to my face. And you made it a third time when you helped Grant cover up his crimes, whether you knew it or not. So what happens now? I stood up and walked to the window. Mrs. Halpern was in her garden again, probably having heard every word of Grant's shouting match. By noon, the entire neighborhood would know about the morning's drama. Now you face the consequences. You'll probably avoid prison. The FBI is more interested in Grant than you, but your career in HR is over. Your reputation is destroyed. Your friends are already distancing themselves from the scandal. And us? I turned to face her. There is no us. There hasn't been for months. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I'll pack my things. I already packed them. Your suitcases are in the garage. She stared at me in shock. You knew this was going to happen. I planned for it to happen. Every move, every revelation, every consequence. I orchestrated all of it. Why? Because you needed to understand that actions have consequences. Because Grant needed to learn that he's not untouchable. And because I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't the weak, naive husband you both thought I was. My phone buzzed with a text from Will. FBI just arrested Grant at his apartment. Charges include embezzlement, corporate espionage, and wire fraud. He's looking at 20 years. I showed the message to Elise. She read it and closed her eyes. 20 years. He earned every day of it. She stood up slowly, like an old woman. I should go. Yes, you should. At the door, she turned back one last time. Mason, I really am sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't give me back the marriage I thought I had. Sorry doesn't undo the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation. Then what does? I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. Justice. Consequences. The knowledge that you'll spend the rest of your life remembering what you threw away. She left without another word. I watched from the window as she loaded her suitcases into her BMW and drove away, probably heading to her sister's house in Connecticut. My phone rang. Read. Saw the show this morning? Hell of a performance. It's not over yet. What do you mean? I walked to my laptop and opened a new browser window. Grant's arrest is just the beginning. The FBI investigation is going to uncover a lot more than corporate espionage. Turns out our boy Grant has been running quite the operation. Insider trading, tax evasion, money laundering through offshore accounts. By the time they're done with him, 20 years will look like a gift. And Elise? Elise gets to live with the knowledge that she destroyed her life for a man who was using her from day one. She'll rebuild, eventually. Find a new job, maybe a new husband. But she'll never forget what she lost. That's cold, Mason. That's justice. I closed the laptop and poured myself a bourbon, even though it wasn't even noon yet. The house felt different already, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the walls themselves. Outside, Mrs. Halpern waved from her garden. I waved back, then raised my glass in a mock toast. Already had dinner with HR, I said aloud, echoing the text message that had started this whole affair. And it was delicious.